Seeking justice, that is the topic of tonight's byline. We've heard it said several times there is no honor in killing. Well, maybe not in these murders, but there is honor in justice. And in the convictions of Mohammed, Tuba, and Hamed Shafia, we can hope for justice. They've been sentenced to life in prison, and we can hope that life actually does mean life. This was a family that plotted to kill 3 of its daughters and 1 of the wives in what was a polygamous family. The Google searches by the father, trying to see if he could run his shopping malls from prisons, his denunciations of his daughters as prostitutes and filthy whores, plus much worse that was said in court, showed a twisted mind, but one that saw killing as honorable. In Canada, we simply cannot abide by that.
This verdict sends a very clear message about our Canadian values and the core principles in a free and democratic society.
Now, this was an honor killing by people who, in accepting the idea of honor killing, rejected our way of life here in Canada. Some, like Aliyah Hobgin of the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, reject the idea of honor killing. Now, that's something I can understand, but in her eyes, there's no difference between domestic violence that happens across Canada and what happened in these Shafia murders. Worse, she says, we have only paid attention to this case because of who the people involved are.
Would there have been such a hullabaloo about this case if it had been non-immigrant, non-Afghani, non-Muslim people?
I have to disagree. Even if every person in this case was named McDonald and their family had been here for 400 years, we would have paid attention. A father, mother, and son killing 3 daughters and the other wife, that's a shocking story, no matter the religion or the culture of the people involved. But for the family involved, their religion and their culture were central to the reason for the murder. And that raises some interesting and disturbing questions. A study by the University of Sherbrooke released last week showed that there have been 15 convictions for honor killing since 1954. 3 of those convictions were between 1954 and 1983. The other 12 since 1999. As reported last week, all the cases involved at least 1 female victim with an average age of 21. All the killers were immigrants, mostly men, who were either Sikh or Muslim. And of course, with all crime, there are those where, well, we just don't catch the perps. We don't recognize the crime for what it truly is, and there are those people who do get away with murder. The number of honor killings and attempts at such is likely much higher. All this coincides with a dramatic upswing in Canada, accepting immigrants from countries where this is considered a standard cultural practice. 30 years ago, countries like Pakistan were not top source countries for new immigrants to this country, but in 2001 and 2006 censuses, Pakistan was the 4th largest contributor of newcomers since 1981. The Shafia family came to Canada from Afghanistan after spending time in Pakistan and Dubai. This twisted version of honor is common in Afghanistan, just as it is in Pakistan. We need to ensure that we change where we're bringing immigrants in from, that they can adapt to the way of life, regardless of where they're coming from, and the values that built Canada. We don't need people importing barbaric practices to this country, be they honor killing, sex-selective abortion, or female genital mutilation. Of course, we also need to make sure that we, as a country, are ready to stand and denounce these practices, rather than worry that our denunciations are not neutral enough, or that they could give offense. And that's the byline. Joining me now is Immigration Minister Jason Kenney, a man who has stood firm in denouncing barbaric practices. In fact, he got into some hot water over that last year. Minister Kenney, the Shafia murders and what we heard in court, do you think that that helps justify the changes that you made? And does it lead you to believe that we need to do more in things like the citizenship guide and the selection process in making sure that those who want to come to Canada know what we're like and that we won't accept these barbaric practices?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. Our government has had a breach from the past where we had this kind of approach of cultural relativism, where I think implicitly the liberal attitude about multiculturalism was that all cultures are equal. We can't denounce any particular culturally based practice because to do so is arrogant and imperialistic. We said no, that's rubbish. That there are certain practices which we bluntly call barbaric in our new citizenship guide, which are condemned in Canada and which will carry the full sanction of the law. That's new language we put in our new citizenship guide 2 years ago called Discover Canada. Every aspirant to Canadian citizenship has to read that and be tested on it. I should point out that this family are permanent residents. They never became citizens. They didn't go through that process. Now, in terms of selection, I've thought a lot about this, Brian. We obviously don't want to be inviting into Canada people who do not intend to integrate, who do not intend on respecting our laws, who don't intend, for example, on respecting the equality of men and women. So the question is, how do you prevent such people from coming in? There's no easy answer. You know, Holland is now requiring prospective immigrants to watch a video that I think is deliberately offensive to some people, showing topless beaches and gay pride parades and trying to show a modern liberal Holland, exactly, to say this is what this is what you're coming to. Australia requires people sign a declaration of assent to Australian national values that are basically democratic
Should we be
values.
Going in that direction, though?
My view is, I've thought a lot about this. My view is that people will sign or watch or read whatever is required of them in order to get access to the prosperity of a country like Canada. And it's just about impossible to get in someone's mind and figure out whether or not they intend to bring to Canada cultural practices that we would consider barbaric and abhorrent. So I think there's no perfect screen to keep such people out.
But we've got more than just honor killings. And people say, well, there's only been 12 since 1999. Speak to people who are worried about this, and they will tell you the number's higher. But you also have sex-selective abortion, where in some immigrant communities we're seeing the number of boys to girls completely out of whack. Female genital mutilation. If we cannot, in the screening process, say, we don't accept these, you can't do these in Canada, will you abide by that? Do we need to say, maybe we don't want to have countries where this is normal practice as some of our top source countries?
Well, you know, Brian, our immigration system has been for decades now neutral with respect to countries of origin. We invite people who we think have the skills to succeed in Canada. That's the core of our economic immigration programs, plus sponsored family members and refugees. And I think the way to screen out the bad apples, as it were, is to improve our security screening. That might not catch people who haven't committed crimes in the past, but it'll catch more of them. It'll catch people who have committed crimes in the past, but not necessarily those who have a clean criminal record, but might commit crimes in the future. What do I mean? So biometric visas, we're going to put this in place so we can check whether people are who they claim to be, and whether or not we are aware of them having committed a crime or constituting a security risk. We're also going to put in place electronic travel authorization that will do the same thing for people coming from visa-exempt countries. And we are being clear about our expectation that people will integrate and that they will respect democratic values, leaving behind ancient hatreds, leaving behind cultural attitudes that treat women like property rather than people, for example. But in an open society like ours, we cannot completely exclude the possibility that some folks are going to hide their connection to some of these cultural practices and come in this country and act them out. You know, all I'm trying to say is we're doing what we can, given the tools that we have in a democratic society. But, you know, my Irish ancestors, when they came here in 19th century Ontario, the Irish Catholics and the Irish Protestants were running around burning down each other's barns, and all the English immigrants were saying, you see, this is what happens when you bring Irish into the country. You know, I think we have to realize that to a certain extent, people are going to bring some baggage into the country. We just need to minimize it.
Well, and I was going to say that this has happened in the past in terms of baggage. So we've got to figure out, okay, if we're not going to change where people are coming from, how do we minimize it when it gets here? You've been in charge of ethnic outreach for your party on the political side for a long time, in addition to your role as immigration minister. Do you talk to people when you go out and you're reaching out to these different ethnic groups? Are there partners for the government to work with to end things like and make it socially unacceptable in Canada that we have either honor killings, female genital mutilation, or sex-selective abortions because, you know, heaven forbid someone give birth to a girl. In fact, on that note, in Afghanistan, a woman on the wires today, a woman killed because she gave birth to a girl, and that did dishonor to the family. I mean, that's a combination story right there. That's what we don't want coming into the country. Do you have partners?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the reasons that we've been willing to be so explicit about promoting integration and the duties and obligations of citizenship rather than just this kind of cultural relativism, political correctness, is because I've heard that from immigrant communities. Overwhelmingly, the people that choose to come to Canada want to become Canadian. They want to integrate. And they are frankly intolerant of those who don't. They don't accept, the vast majority of immigrants that I've met, and I've met tens of thousands, say to me, Mr. Kenney, we came here to be Canadians, to raise our kids as Canadians. Yes, maintaining a positive pride for what's best about their cultural background, which is part of our tradition of pluralism, but absolutely excluding the idea that multiculturalism justifies honor killings, female genital mutilation, treating women like property, bringing ancient hatreds into the country. Most newcomers want to have nothing to do with that. And so most of the groups we work with in the cultural communities share a pro-integration view, and I think do marginalize and stigmatize those who want to bring, frankly, backward practices into this modern democracy.
All right. Immigration Minister Jason Kenney, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Send us your thoughts on this and where the government should be going. Byline at sunmedia.ca. You send along something good, we'll share it with the minister.